earlier. And when I was talking to my son during the pandemic, I was like, hey, remember that, sidecar motorcycle coffee thing I saw? Why don't we try to build one that actually we can use and ride around and do events with it? And so we kind of designed a lot of it ourselves, just not knowing exactly how the inner workings should be. We just figured it out with the help of some taco truck guys that knew how to kind of do some of the plumbing. And, that's kind of how it started.
So when you have that, obviously you have a very limited menu when you have, very limited room. What would would you be able to do espressos still, or what would the menu kind of look like?
Yeah, it's funny. That was my main thing is, I was like, if we do this, we want to do the real deal, like the full, really good espresso. And so, there was some temptation just to say, okay, let's just make a drip coffee machine, or let's just put taps and do like cold brew, which, isn't a bad idea. But I wanted to have like a full coffee bar, as full as we could have on a, a counter that was about 4 feet by 3 feet,
Right.
And, so we bought a La Marzocco GS3, which is kind of like the prosumer. It's definitely, it's NSF rated, it's commercial grade, but it's small enough that people buy it for their houses if they can afford to, because they're like $7,000. And we bought one of those that doesn't have a very big footprint, but it is a serious machine with, all the inner workings of their, $20,000 machines just kind of shrunk down into a small size. And we bought a real grinder, an Anfim grinder out of Italy as well. And we were able to, the benefit was we found those and they both worked off of 120 power, which was also, I think, important that we figured out a way to not have to, find 220 power. And a lot of the commercial grade espresso machines require, 220 volts. And so we didn't need that. So we could do events that we could just plug into a standard outlet as long as it had like 30 amps.
Wow. That's crazy. I was curious about that when I heard that. I was like, well, hold on. How did they still do espresso? Because, again, you're working on very limited room, and sidecars aren't that big either. So, okay, I was very curious how that all worked out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Those taco truck guys were really helpful on that because we have this input cable that goes into our sidecar. It looks kind of cool. Like it just plugs right into the sidecar and into an outlet. And then inside we've got this converter box that allows us to run like 6 outlets through there. And we've only had issues maybe like one event out of who knows how many, 80, 100 events where, the power was not enough. And so, they were really helpful on us figuring out how to distribute the power so that we could run these machines.
So how did you mentioned that they helped you with the plumbing aspect as well. How did the plumbing work? Where did the water go?
Yeah. So we learned a lot very quickly. There was a lot to figure out because the health department has requirements on things like that. Our original design, we didn't have a sink. The health department required us to have a hand washing sink, and so we had to add that. That took up even more room and things. And then the other thing is we had to have a gray water tank on board that had something like 15 or 20% more capacity than our freshwater tanks. And we had to have a freshwater tank for the hand washing sink and a separate one for the espresso machine. And so anyway, the sidecar is full of stuff. There's like 2 freshwater tanks and a gray water tank along the bottom, and then all the electrical stuff, and then onboard on-demand pumps to run everything. And so it was a little more complicated. People are kind of focused on the equipment that's sitting on top of the counter, but the inner workings that kind of make it all work was probably the most complicated part.
It does sound like it because you have to have all of this stuff in such a tight little quarter that it's almost like, not that you're MacGyvering things, but you are definitely getting very creative when it comes to how you're having to do things.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like the duck, you know, where it looks really cool on top of the water, but all the work's happening
Right.
underneath. And so like all the stuff, it's like walnut countertops and all the equipment's black and everything looks really cool. But yeah, the stuff inside that makes it all work is also pretty to me, but not as, not as beautiful.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people aren't thinking like, oh, I wonder how all this is working under there. They're just like, oh yeah, look how pretty it is. They can make coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you guys still use that for special events and stuff, and is it still the same one, or have you guys maybe modified another one or figured out something else?
No, we still have the same one, and we still use it a fair amount. We call it the mascot now. Like we built kind of a secondary logo that is a kind of a line drawing of our sidecar motorcycle, but we turned the sidecar into a mug on the logo. It's kind of cool because people identify, oh, you guys are the motorcycle sidecar coffee guys, and so even though we have 2 cafes now and a roasting business, people still kind of associate us with the motorcycle, which we like. And it's usually on display at one of our 2 cafes when we're not using it for events. So we still do events mostly in the summer, you know, spring, summer, fall, mostly on the weekends. And then, the times that we're not using it, it's on display and things, but it still runs. I mean, we ride it to all of our events and everything still.
Man. Yeah, I saw that it was on some of your merchandise, and I was like, I didn't know at the time. I didn't know what the story was, and I started doing a little more research. I was like, oh, that makes way more sense because I imagine, like, you guys got a lot of attention for that one thing, which I imagine was very helpful. You know, when you start a business, you kind of want to stand out from what other people are doing. You don't want to do the exact same thing. And with the coffee world, you know, once Starbucks kind of blew up, not everybody, most people were like, how can we do something like that? And, you know, obviously on a much smaller mom and pop scale. But what you did, you saw, I mean, like you said, you were thinking about this for over 10 years and visiting all these different coffee shops, and you did something completely different, and you didn't get the brick and mortar at first because most people will just try to get that and then build off of that. You created your business off of, well, you know, your 2 loves, which was motorcycles and coffee, and you put them together. And then you are that person that you are a niche and an attraction as opposed to just a brick and mortar coffee place that you have to go to. Like, this can come to you, obviously for a price because it's events and, you know, you're not just going to do it for free. But how much attention were you guys getting doing that before you decided to actually get a brick and mortar?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, when I think about it now, it's really obvious to me. Like I had a 25-year career in like digital marketing and branding and things like that, in the automotive industry, not in the coffee industry. But, really this was a proof of concept in my mind. It was a way for us to, enter the, coffee shop, kind of coffee business without having to, you know, sign up for a lease on a big building and things like that and kind of make that big of a commitment. And so, part of the proof of concept for me was, will people like the kind of coffee that I want to make and serve? Because, I definitely was more of a third wave coffee guy. And there's still a lot of people that like kind of more of the dark, super dark roasted coffees and things that, Starbucks is still known for and Pete's and a lot of other coffee shops coffee businesses that have been around for 20 plus years. And so, you know, there already was a third wave coffee shop or 2 here in Salt Lake, but I was like, is there enough people that are going to like this kind of coffee that I want to serve? And so we wanted to prove that concept as well. And then I think the timing with the pandemic, worked for us in a way because, you know, people were definitely comfortable coming to an outside, coffee cart that was parked, you know, beside their favorite, gourmet grocery store or in front of their favorite, shop or whatever. So we were popping up at different events and different things, and we'd have a line sometimes like 60 feet long of people, you know, waiting to get coffee. And so it definitely was a good way for us to say, okay, people love this kind of coffee. There's enough people that are digging what we're doing. And I think if we opened a coffee shop now with even just the social media following that we had after our first 6 to 8 months, we felt like we could support a business.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you almost took the food truck aspect of what they were doing with pop-ups and everything, and you applied it to your coffee. And like you said, you know, with the motorcycle aspect of it, people definitely want to be like, oh, what's this motorcycle coffee right outside, like you said, my grocery store or at a farmer's market or whatever. So you're bringing the attention to them. And I think that's just a really smart business thing. And like you said, you weren't, I guess, meaning to do it that way, but it worked out obviously perfect for you.
Yeah. And we considered a truck and a trailer. We in fact got very close to buying a trailer that was already kind of outfitted for coffee. And the timing didn't work out, and it kind of got bought out from under us, the one that we wanted. And then I was like, you know what? Let's just figure out and build this motorcycle thing that we've been thinking about. And it had some drawbacks, which I didn't really fully appreciate until we got well down the path. But like you can't get here in Utah, at least you can't get a seasonal, like permit like you can as a food truck or a food trailer, that allows you to kind of like vend anywhere and kind of, you know, park it anywhere and you're a food truck. We had to get like event permits, and things because we were technically a coffee cart, not a coffee truck or a coffee trailer. And so even the food truck leagues and the different services that kind of schedule you for events, they wouldn't really deal with us either because we didn't have a seasonal permit and we didn't fit into their business model exactly right. And so we had to scramble. We had to kind of like hustle ourselves to kind of find events that would work for us that we could get event permits for that were, you know, worth our while and stuff like that.
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, it's always funny to hear that part of someone's business when they have to deal with the city and permits and all these things that, you know, most people don't think about whenever they do think about starting a business and all that. Is the city going to be on board? Are they going to help us with this certain things? What permits do we need? All that kind of stuff. So that part is always a little, it's not the sexy part of it, but it's interesting to look back on. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know before we already had mostly built out what we wanted that we couldn't get even a permit to just vend on sidewalks and things because the taco stands that you see, at least the ones here in Utah, they have a roof and they have sides that kind of fold down and close up on themselves. And here in Utah, at least, that was a requirement for like a sidewalk vending cart. And so we would have had to like completely change our design to fit that with like foldable sides and a roof and everything like that. And I was just like, if you've seen pictures of our setup, it's just basically a countertop with an umbrella, you know, kind of over the top. And they were like, yeah, that's not going to work for like a sidewalk vendor. So we learned a lot that first year, trial and error.
Well, so I was going to ask, from starting as a pop-up shop the way you did to now having, you know, like you said, 2 cafes, what do you feel you learned the most from where you started to where you are now?
Well, one thing I learned is that I prefer cafes to pop-up shops.
Yeah.
I like being able to turn on the lights and start making espresso for, you know, a lot of regular customers that are just coming and walking in. But I also appreciate the fact that people, when they see us out at events on the motorcycle, it's exciting, it's different, it's cool. And so I'm glad we started that way, and I'm glad we still can do that because I think it's meaningful and it's fun, and it's opened up a whole bunch of cool opportunities. One of which we can talk about if you want is we were at an event in the desert in Moab that we knew they were shooting a TV show, and Keanu Reeves was there and Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead was there. And those guys just totally loved our mobile coffee setup on the motorcycle, and we got some great video of that. And we ended up on the show itself.